My wedding day in Kansas was meant to be the happiest day of my life, and the one I had been dreaming of for a very long time. In the company of loved ones, it was supposed to be a happy celebration of love. Instead, though, it became a nightmare that devastated me and made me doubt all of my beliefs. The ceremony was lovely in its own right. The guests were all grinning, the flowers were beautifully arranged, and the music was playing quietly in the background. I felt a surge of eagerness and excitement as I glanced around the room. I was eager to begin our new life together, and Logan and I had spent months organizing every aspect. It was all so good until it wasn't. Things started to fall apart as the evening wore on. It began when Mrs. Owen, Logan's mother, came up to me. She was a severe woman in her late 50s who frequently intimidated others around her with her air of authority. She yelled my name with a serious look on her face. "Kendra," she murmured, her tone icy and disapproving. "I need to speak with you." I trailed behind her to a more tranquil section of the stadium, hoping it was a little issue that could be easily resolved. But the moment we were alone, her anger sprang up. Her face was red, and her voice was piercing. "You've been incredibly disrespectful today," she said at me with a frown, "and you've embarrassed me in front of everyone here." It surprised me. Being careful and polite had been my entire day. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying not to freak out even though my heart was racing. I didn't get a chance to explain myself. "Stop acting like you're innocent," she screamed. "After joining this family, you think you can achieve everything you set your mind to. You are a waste of time." She said something that was like a kick to the gut. It was incredible what I was listening to. Logan approached me while I was collecting my thoughts. The tension must have been palpable to him from across the room. He was staring at us both, his face unbreakable. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone sharp and questioning. The way he asked, however, suggested that he had a suspect. Mrs. Owen said, "Kendra has been disrespectful, raising her voice to be heard. She's ruined the day for everyone." I was astounded by what was happening. Before I could respond, Logan turned harshly and disappointedly to face me. He questioned, "Is this true?" with piercing eyes. "Have you been causing trouble?" "No," was my stern reply, but my voice trailed off with emotion. "I haven't done anything wrong." Instead of believing me, though, he seemed even more upset. That was the exact moment I felt completely alone, standing between the man I loved and his mother, who appeared determined to ruin all we had worked so hard to build. What should have been a day of happiness and love had instead become a scene of treachery and heartache. Logan's chilly stare interrupted my attempt to enjoy my wedding. He said, "You've made a fool of yourself and my mother," loud enough for the visitors in the vicinity to hear. "This is unacceptable." Even though his remarks were a shock to me, nothing could have prepared me for what came next. Logan reached out and gave me a startling slap across the cheek. The room reverberated with the sound of the smack, and I felt embarrassed. The shame of being struck in front of everyone caused my face to sting in addition to the physical pain. There was utter silence in the room. Unsure of what to do, guests exchanged nervous looks. Nobody offered to assist. As if she had just prevailed in a fight, Logan's mother watched with a smug expression on her face. Then the silence was broken by Logan's angry voice. He yelled, "You're a disgrace. My mother has been dishonored by you. It's unbelievable to me that I married someone like you." His remarks left me speechless and stuck in place. My eyes filled with tears, but I was immobile. The faces of the guests surrounding me blurred in shock. My feet felt like they were glued to the ground, preventing me from running and escaping this terrible spectacle. Logan's actions were heartbreaking, not simply upsetting. My dignity was torn away on what should have been the best time of my life, in front of everyone I knew. I could feel the weight of the visitors' judgment as they slowly started to grumble and awkwardly resume their talks. The reception's music and laughing appeared to mock my suffering. I had reached a breaking point. I left the reception and went to a private area in the rear of the building, away from curious onlookers. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I had dreamed of this day as a fairy tale, a celebration of Logan's actions and his mother's clear satisfaction in my humiliation weren't just a moment of anger. They were signs of a deeper, darker reality that I hadn't fully seen before. As I wiped my tears and looked at my reflection in the dim light, a quiet determination began to grow within me. I couldn't let this moment define me. I couldn't let their cruelty break me. I made a silent promise to myself. I would not stay silent, and I would not remain a victim. No matter how hard it might be, I would fight for my dignity and for the truth. The wedding, once a symbol of a new beginning, had become something else entirely. It was now a turning point in my life. The pain and betrayal I felt were overwhelming, but they sparked something powerful within me, a fire that would drive me to reclaim my life and my future. I knew the journey to take back control of my life and seek justice would be long and difficult, but I was determined to face it head-on. This was only the beginning of my fight, and I refused to let Logan and Mrs. Owen's actions define me. In the weeks after the disastrous wedding, I felt like I was living in a haze. The pain of Logan humiliating me in front of everyone was still fresh, but what hurt even more was realizing that my marriage had been a lie. Despite everything, I knew I couldn't let their cruelty dictate my future. I needed to take charge of my life and find a way to fight back. My first step was to gather proof. I understood that exposing Logan and his mother would require more than just my word. I needed solid evidence of the emotional and financial abuse I had suffered. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator named K.I. Bernier. He was known for being discreet and effective. After reaching out to him, we had a brief meeting, and he agreed to take my case. Maxim Bernier was a calm and thoughtful man in his mid-50s with sharp instincts. He listened carefully as I shared the events of my wedding and described the ongoing abuse. "This must be very hard for you," he said gently. "But if you're willing to work with me, we can uncover the truth." I nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "I'll do whatever it takes," I replied. "I just want the truth to come out." With his help, I began recording my conversations with Logan and Mrs. Owen. It wasn't easy. Carrying a small recorder in my purse felt strange and stressful, but I knew it was necessary. I needed undeniable proof of how manipulative and cruel they were. It didn't take long to capture the evidence. One evening, Logan and I had a heated argument during dinner. As I recorded the conversation, I felt a mix of dread and determination. Logan's voice was full of anger. "You're so useless," he spat. "Why can't you ever do anything right?" Trying to stay calm, I replied, "I'm doing my best." "Why are you always so critical?" His response was cold and cruel. "Your best isn't good enough. You're a burden on me and my mother, and everyone knows it." Listening to his words later made me realize how deeply their abuse ran. It wasn't just about what happened at the wedding. It was a long-standing pattern of emotional cruelty. With each recording, I pieced together a clearer picture of their behavior, strengthening my resolve to expose them. Meanwhile, Maxim Bernier was investigating their financial dealings. He conducted background checks and looked into their accounts, searching for any signs of wrongdoing. After several weeks, he came back with some troubling discoveries. "I found some suspicious transactions," Maxim Bernier said, his face serious. "It looks like Logan and Mrs. Owen might be involved in financial fraud." My heart started pounding as he laid out the details. There are large sums of money being moved between various accounts. It seems they might be embezzling funds from clients. I was stunned. The revelation was shocking, but it also made sense. Logan was a financial advisor, and Mrs. Owen had always been heavily involved in his business. Their abusive behavior wasn't just personal, it was part of something darker. They weren't just controlling and cruel, they were criminals. However, I knew that these financial records alone wouldn't be enough to expose them. The recordings of their emotional abuse were important, but I needed to connect all the pieces together. That's when Elizabeth, my best friend, stepped in to help. Elizabeth was in her early 40s with a sharp mind and a heart full of loyalty. Throughout this difficult time, she had been my constant source of strength, always there with words of encouragement and support. When I shared the evidence with her, her reaction was a mix of shock and determination. "We have to act on this," she said firmly, flipping through the recordings and financial documents. "This isn't just about you anymore. They're committing serious crimes together." Elizabeth and I got to work. We reviewed all the evidence, listening to hours of recordings and highlighting instances of emotional abuse. We then cross-referenced the recordings with the financial documents Maxim Bernier had found. It was exhausting, but it also gave me a sense of power. With every piece of evidence we uncovered, I felt stronger and more determined to see this through. One evening, as we sat surrounded by papers and notes, Elizabeth looked up at me. "Kendra, you've come so far already," she said, her voice full of encouragement. "You've gathered so much evidence. Now it's time to take the next step." I nodded, feeling both nervous and resolute. "I'm ready," I said. "They need to be held accountable for everything they've done." We came up with a bold plan. I decided to organize a public event where I would expose Logan and Mrs. Owen. It was important to me that their deceit and cruelty were revealed in front of an audience, so they couldn't hide from the truth. The idea was terrifying but empowering. This would be the final step in reclaiming my life and bringing justice to light. As we prepared for the event, the weight of what I was about to do pressed on me. The fear was real, but so was my determination. With Maxim Bernier's evidence, Elizabeth's unwavering support, and my own resolve, I felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. This was my chance to stand up, not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been hurt or silenced. It was time to take my life back. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey had been long and difficult, but I knew it was leading me to a turning point. This was my chance to stand up for myself and expose the truth. No matter how hard it would be, I was determined to take control of my life and fight for justice. Finally, the day of the event arrived. The air was thick with tension, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. I had planned everything carefully, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. The venue was a grand hall, elegantly decorated to create a sense of sophistication. It stood in stark contrast to the truth I was about to reveal. I had invited family, friends, and members of the media. I wanted as many people as possible to see and hear what I had uncovered. As the guests began to fill the hall, I could feel the buzz of excitement and curiosity in the air. My stomach fluttered with nerves, but I reminded myself of why I was doing this. Logan and Mrs. Owen were among the attendees. They stood confidently by my side, their smiles bright and carefree. They had no idea what was about to happen. The event began with speeches and toasts, creating a festive and cheerful atmosphere. I played my role as the gracious hostess, smiling and chatting with the guests. But inside, I felt like an actor in a drama that was about to reach its climax. I took deep breaths to steady myself as the moment of truth approached. When it was time for my announcement, I walked to the podium. The room fell silent, and every eye turned to me. Logan and Mrs. Owen exchanged curious glances, their smiles still in place, but tinged with unease. I took a moment to gather my thoughts, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Thank you all for coming today," I began, my voice steady but full of emotion. This event was meant to celebrate a new beginning, but today it has become something much more important. The guests looked intrigued, leaning forward in their seats. I continued, "What I'm about to share has been hidden for too long. It's the truth behind the image that Logan and his mother have worked so hard to maintain." I noticed Logan's smile fade, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. Mrs. Owen's expression remained calm, but there was tension in her posture. I took a deep breath, picked up a remote, and pressed a button. The screen behind me came to life, showing audio recordings and financial documents. The first recording began to play, a conversation between Logan and me during one of our arguments. His angry voice filled the room, his harsh words cutting like a knife. The crowd sat in stunned silence as the recording continued, exposing the emotional abuse I had endured. This was just the beginning of the truth I was about to reveal. I saw a mix of shock and sympathy on the faces of the guests as they listened to the recordings. They heard Logan calling me names and belittling me, his harsh words cutting deep. The screen then switched to the financial documents that Maxim Bernier had uncovered. These documents showed large sums of money being moved between accounts, clearly pointing to the fraudulent activities Logan and Mrs. Owen were involved in. The numbers on the screen were staggering, and the evidence was undeniable. As the recordings and documents continued to play, I saw Logan's demeanor change. His face turned pale, and his eyes darted nervously around the room, clearly realizing how serious the situation was. Mrs. Owen, on the other hand, looked furious and embarrassed. Her face was flushed, and she glanced around the room, seemingly searching for a way out. As the truth unraveled before everyone, I felt a surge of strength and determination. I addressed the crowd, my voice steady and clear. These recordings and documents are evidence of the abuse and fraud that Logan and his mother have committed. They have not only manipulated and controlled me, but also taken advantage of others. It's time for the truth to come to light. The media representatives in the room were busy scribbling notes and taking pictures, capturing every moment. The atmosphere in the hall shifted dramatically. What had started as a celebration had now become a moment of revelation and outrage. Guests began murmuring to one another, their shock and disbelief evident. Logan finally broke his silence. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and desperation as he shouted, "This is ridiculous. These are just lies and distortions. You're trying to ruin us." But his protests were weak compared to the overwhelming evidence displayed before the crowd. The guests, now fully aware of the situation, began reacting. Some expressed their outrage, their voices rising in disapproval. Others offered me words of support and sympathy, showing me that they stood by my side. The hall buzzed with conversation and emotion. I felt a sense of validation and empowerment as I watched the truth sink in for everyone. Logan and Mrs. Owen, who had once stood so confidently, were now scrambling to maintain their composure. Their carefully crafted image of respectability was completely shattered. As the event drew to a close, Logan and Mrs. Owen attempted to leave quietly, but they couldn't escape the crowd. The media cameras followed their every move, and questions were thrown at them from all directions. Their once confident facades had crumbled, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. For me, it was a moment of triumph. This event had not only exposed their lies and cruelty, but also marked a significant step toward reclaiming my life. The truth was finally out, and I felt a sense of freedom and hope for the future. It was a victory not just in exposing them, but in taking back my own power. I had taken control of my story and fought back against the injustice I had endured. As I looked at the stunned faces around me and the flurry of activity in the room, I felt a mix of relief and determination. The truth was finally out, but I knew my journey was far from over. In the days after the event, everything felt like a whirlwind. The truth about Logan and Mrs. Owen spread quickly, and the fallout was enormous. Media coverage was relentless, and the public reacted with both outrage at their actions and support for me. People began to see me as a symbol of resilience and justice, but I understood that my real fight had just begun. As weeks passed, the media continued to dig into Logan and Mrs. Owen's lives. Their fraudulent activities were scrutinized, and investigations began to unravel the full extent of their financial crimes. The once confident duo now faced legal battles that could strip them of their wealth and reputations. While the spotlight remained on them, I had my own work to do. I needed to make sure justice was served. With the help of my lawyer, who had been by my side through everything, we prepared a strong case. We carefully organized all the evidence we had collected, the recordings, financial documents, and testimonies, into a solid legal argument. When the trial began, I was nervous but determined. The courtroom was an intimidating place, but I faced it with courage. Taking the stand to testify about the abuse and fraud was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Reliving those painful moments was emotionally draining, but I reminded myself that I was doing this for my future, for my freedom. Logan and Mrs. Owen tried to defend themselves, but their arguments were weak. They attempted to discredit me and dismiss the recordings, but it didn't work. The financial documents clearly showed the extent of their wrongdoing, and the recordings highlighted their emotional cruelty. Their credibility fell apart as the truth was laid bare. The trial reached its peak when the judge announced the verdict. Logan was found guilty of financial fraud and ordered to repay the victims he had stolen from. Mrs. Owen also faced legal consequences, including fines and a damaged reputation. The judge acknowledged the emotional abuse I had suffered and granted me a divorce. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served. The pain and humiliation I had endured were now part of the past. While there was still healing to do, I knew this was a new beginning. I had taken back my life, defended myself, and demonstrated that I could not be silenced. Although my path had been challenging, it had strengthened me, and I felt free for the first time in a long time. I was relieved by the court victory, but it was bittersweet. It was satisfying to see justice done, but the process had worn me out. Despite my fatigue, I felt thankful. I had finally prevailed after a protracted and difficult battle. I was proud of what I had accomplished and felt a sense of closure, even if the emotional scars would take time to heal. I made the decision to begin a new chapter in my life after the court struggle was over. I left the chaos and unpleasant memories of my previous life behind and went to a peaceful house outside of Seattle, Washington. The tranquil settings provided me with a much-needed fresh start. I reflected on everything I had gone through as I sat on my porch and watched the sun set over the undulating hills. Although there had been many hardships and difficulties along the way, it had also been a route to empowerment. I had taken back my life and done the right thing. Maxim Bernier's assistance and that of my best friend Elizabeth had been crucial. When I wanted to give up, their unfailing faith in me kept me going. The transformation from victim to victor had changed me. I had overcome some of the most difficult times in my life. I had taken charge of my tale, and the truth about the crimes and abuse committed by Logan and Mrs. Owen had come to light. Their behaviors no longer made me feel like a victim. Rather, I felt as though I had retaliated and prevailed. I had not felt content and at peace in years as I sat in the quiet of my new house. I had moved past the past and was looking forward to a bright future. My narrative had evolved into one of fortitude, fairness, and optimism. It demonstrated to me and others that we can muster the courage to resist even in the most trying circumstances. I considered how far I had progressed. I had taken back my life, confronted my fears, and revealed the truth. Although the path wasn't straightforward, it had brought me to this state of contentment and tranquility. Though they had molded me, the traumatic events no longer defined who I was. Rather, they served as a reminder of my fortitude and will. Now that the past was firmly in the past, I looked forward to the future with purpose and hope. This new chapter offered a chance to start again and construct a happy, meaningful life. I had shown myself that it is possible to shine even in the most difficult circumstances. I was overcome with thankfulness as I gazed over the serene hills. I had recovered my life, discovered my power, and battled for justice. I was now prepared to put the suffering of the past behind me and live life to the fullest.